Hello and welcome to the CIM MES Mentor Interview. I'm Jackie Allison, Chair of MES, which is the Management and Economic Society of the Canadian Institute of Mining, Metallurgy and Petroleum. It's my pleasure today to have with me David Garofalo, and I'd like to welcome him here.
Hi, Jackie.
Good to have you on, Dave. Dave is Chair and CEO at Gold Royalty Corp. And so we're going to hear a bit about his background and his story, his career to date, and really looking forward to getting your insights, Dave, for those who may be listening. So perhaps we could step back. A lot of people come into the industry from different backgrounds. It'd be good to hear just a bit about your educational background and then how you ended up in the career that you've had with many great roles in some of Canada's biggest companies. So tell us about it.
Well, I think it's a pretty inauspicious start. I got a commerce degree at University of Toronto. I did my CPA with Deloitte. I actually had no mining clients when I was doing my audit articling with Deloitte, and was headhunted by a local recruiting agency to join Inmet Mining as a very junior accountant. And it was doing consolidation accounting and financial planning, and I was running the IT systems. And then went into project development, preparing feasibility studies, going out for tender on major contracts. And that's really where I started to fall in love with the business and started to learn it from the basics. And that really launched me into the career that I've enjoyed up to this point.
Yes, wonderful. So from Inmet, what was your next stop?
We spent 8 years at Inmet, ended up as treasurer there. We were financing a number of mine developments there over several years. And it was through the proposed sale of the Troilus gold mine in Quebec, which ultimately didn't get sold for a variety of reasons. But I met Sean Boyd, and Sean was a CFO at Agnico at the time, came into our data room. And this is when data rooms were actually physical, not virtual. And we got to know each other, spent some time going over Troilus. And Agnico ultimately didn't bid on the asset. But when Sean got promoted to CEO, he called me up. This was 1998, and asked me to come and join him as a CFO. And I jumped at it, and that led to a 12-year career at Agnico and the construction of about a half a dozen mines over 12 years. And Sean is a tremendous mentor, and still in the role all these years, almost 25 years later. We had a great time in those 12 years. Myself, Sean, Yves Shirkus. And when I started at Agnico, it was a tiny head office. We had a couple hundred employees, mostly in Laurent, but we had maybe half a dozen employees at head office, including assistants. So it was really, really tiny. And by the time I left Agnico, I think we were north of 5,000 employees and 6 active mines. So it was really quite a ride.
Yes, that was quite a bit of growth going on there. And so when we met, I think you were at Agnico Eagle in that CFO role, and then we worked together after that at Hudbay. So tell us about how that came about, your switch to Hudbay. A different sector related, yes, but somewhat different. Tell us about it.
It's interesting. I came back to base metals because Inmet was a copper producer with some gold deposits as well, but predominantly copper focused. And after 12 years at Agnico, and with the successful completion of those 6 mine developments, I was looking for new challenges. I felt like I'd done the CFO role to death, and Hudbay came calling. And they recognized the base metal experience I brought to the table as well from my days at Inmet. So I hadn't necessarily lost that muscle memory, if you will, on the base metal side. And this gave me an opportunity to run my own company. Sean was still a very young CEO at the time. He was still in his early 50s. So he wasn't going anywhere, and nor should he, and he's still enjoying the role. So the only way for me to really grow professionally was to go out on my own. And the Hudbay opportunity was very, very enticing to me because it had a similar skill set to Agnico. They had been operating in the Flin Flon Snow Lake region in northern Manitoba for 100 years. And there were many, many generations of employees, 3rd, 4th generation employees there. So there was quite a bit of expertise inherent in the business. And on top of that, they had about $1 billion on the balance sheet that they had generated from successfully operating in northern Manitoba. But what they didn't have was a strategic plan to diversify and to grow the business within Manitoba. So in the 6 years I was at Hudbay, we developed 3 mines. 2 in Manitoba. We reinvested back into the business to make sure that we could perpetuate the business beyond just 777, which was the only active mine at the time. We built Lalor. which is now the center of gravity for Hudbay, northern Manitoba, and the Reed copper mine. And then we struck out and diversified into Peru with the acquisition of Norsemont and the Constancia project. And we spent almost $2 billion investing in, which it was really a generational copper mine. It is the core of Hudbay's business. Generates very, very significant free cash flow today with current copper prices, and still has 25 to 30 years of reserve life ahead of it. So it was the right decision for us to make, to diversify the business and provided a real core asset, cornerstone asset, if you will, that Hudbay, I'm sure, will be able to leverage and grow over time.
Absolutely. So Hudbay was a very different company at the time when you left than at the time that you started. So congratulations for growing it. Tell us about your change then from Hudbay over to Goldcorp.
Well, Ian Telfer kind of knocked on my door, and unbeknownst to the market, Chuck Janessa decided he wanted to retire, and it was just too good an opportunity to pass up. Running a major gold company. It was one of the largest cap gold companies in the world. And with Ian Telfer, Ian's a legend in the space. Knew him in passing, over the years on the conference circuit. He's somebody you could always strike up a conversation with. He's such a down-to-earth, humble guy, and easy and approachable, and always willing to share stories and advice. And when he approached me for the opportunity, I jumped at it, moved my family out to Vancouver, and started a new life here. And it was a lot of fun. Running Goldcorp was a tremendous opportunity. And I think what I learned after 3 years is that there was going to be consolidation at the top, and we needed to participate in that. We needed critical mass. All four of the companies that participated in that consolidation, Barrick, Randgold, ourselves, and Newmont, were all facing cliffs in their production and reserve profile. And it became an existential imperative for the guys at the top to start the merge and create that critical mass and diversity in the portfolio. And, I think it was absolutely the right decision for us to do that. And anybody that owned the stock at the time we announced it have seen the value of their investment triple. So it was the right thing to do, not only because the gold price has gone up, but both Barrick and Newmont experienced a re-rate and attracted generalist investors as a result of achieving that critical mass with those mergers.
Yes, transformational there too. So you mentioned family there, and you've had some busy roles. I know you're on the road sometimes with, at least when we could be on the road, traveling to see investors and sites. And tell us how you've managed that with a large family.
Yeah, it's a good question. I was married for 25 years to my first wife, Laura, who passed away from cancer about 5 years ago. And we raised 3 kids together in Toronto, and we were just starting to move out to Vancouver when she passed away. I've been very, very fortunate to remarry locally here in Vancouver to Christy. And Christy brought 5 kids of her own into the family. So we have a blended family of 8. And I would say we're both very dynamic parents, I should say, and very involved in our lives. And our kids are all doing extremely well. 4 have left the nest. The 5th is about to leave shortly. And they're all university bound or graduated from university in the case of a couple of our older kids. And you know what? The kids are remarkably self-sufficient. All we can do is model the way we live. And the rest of it is really up to them. I can't take a lot of credit for how they've turned out other than, Christy and I model a certain life, a certain moral code, instead about how we live our lives. And I think by and large, our kids have all turned out really well as a result of that. And they've become otherwise self-sufficient. So, we're just kind of bystanders. My sister this morning was trying to tell me to provide more advice to my daughter who's off to McGill, the youngest of my 3.
Right.
And I said, you know what, I'm just a passenger in that vehicle. I write the checks, and they're self-starters, and and my 2 older ones have turned out really well without me having to provide unsolicited advice.
Yes, there's only so much advice I think kids that age will take.
And you're a very successful mom in your own right. I know your kids are super overachievers, and
well, they've done okay, thanks. And I know sometimes that it's time to step back and let them do their thing. But
exactly.
I'm there in the background. I'm there if they need me, and I certainly have words of advice if they're also looking for them. So yes, I think we try and set a good example and let them strike out on their own and see where they go.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So what about hobbies? I remember you were quite an avid cycler. Are you still able to do a lot of that?
Yeah, I am, and I have to tell you, in the COVID world that we live in now, I'm probably in the best place in the world in terms of having an active outdoor lifestyle. I live on the side of a mountain in West Vancouver, overlooking the ocean, and so I can trail run with my dogs through the rainforest here,
Okay.
and I cycle a lot. Last year I think I did, because I didn't travel at all last year. I
That's
cycled
right.
over 7,500 kilometers. And I'm
Wow.
probably going to do about the same this year, just
Yeah.
because travel doesn't look like it's on the horizon right away.
Not
So
yet.
no, it's a great way to kind of mix work and pleasure, and having this home office set up now that we're all having the experience,
Yeah, yeah.
makes it conducive to escaping for a couple hours in the middle of the day for a run or a ride, and then coming back and going to work. So
Yeah, it's a great setup. Sounds very good. And I think you also volunteer. I know you've had interest in other organizations. Can you tell us a bit about that?
yeah, look, I've always done stuff on the healthcare side. My wife's involved with BC Women's. I'm doing fundraising for BC Children's as well in the Mining for Miracles event.
Mhm.
I'm deputy chair of the Vancouver Symphony Orchestra, which has had
Wow.
its own challenges in this COVID environment.
Mhm.
We actually
Right.
can't perform to live audiences, but I think we've sustained ourselves fairly well in this online digital universe and offering our stuff. I also serve on the board of the Vancouver Board of Trade as well, which has been a great way for somebody who's relatively new to the Vancouver area. I've only been here 5 years to get
Right.
integrated into the business community.
Good. Yes, I'm sure that you're on the go all the time between that and work and your ability to cycle. So it's not a very quiet lifestyle. It doesn't sound like, but it sounds like you're achieving quite a lot both in the workplace and outside of it. So congrats for that. What would you say for those who are relatively new to the industry? Let's say they're students or they're youngsters who just got into the profession, something in mining. Were there any highlights or I'd say significant moments that you would want to highlight that maybe were turning points for you?
Yeah, you know what? It's the mentors that stick with me, and I had have to say that those mentorships were rather organic to what I was doing. I was hired by Richard Ross at Inmet back in 1990 when he was still a very young controller, and ultimately he rose to CEO, and we had a great relationship, and he beat the mining industry into my head, through really working me very hard and exposing me to a lot of opportunities and being very, very hard on me and making sure that I held myself to a high standard. And that really set me up. And I would say those types of moments. And then Sean, he's a very quiet mentor, very, very humble guy, Sean Boyd at Ignico, but he's the most capital market savvy guy I've ever worked with, and just learned a lot via osmosis working with him and getting exposed to the capital markets more directly as a CFO at the time with Ignico. And beyond that, oodles of a lot of people I've met over the course of my career, and most recently Ian Telfer. I would say the mentorships are the ones that stick with me. So trying to find somebody that you can learn from and attaching yourself to them, if you will, and almost leeching that information from them is an extremely important element to having a successful career, in my view.
Yes, I think you make a great point there. And that is built on networking. So the opportunity for students or young people to be in touch with some of those who've been in the industry for a longer period of time. Hopefully, as you say, organically, it's there. Sometimes it isn't, and they have to go outside and search a bit harder or try a bit harder to establish those relationships, but they are invaluable. And certainly when it comes to hearing about new job opportunities, or at least people get to know you, develop those relationships that you can be, top of mind if something else comes up, that also helps. And so we do encourage the students that we're in touch with through MES to learn that skill. It is a skill. It doesn't come naturally to everyone, but it's invaluable, and it's something they should start working on as soon as they can. And it's, relationship building is a long-term business. And so definitely to take it seriously and take advantage of any opportunity to meet people. I guess along the way then, in many of those roles that you've had, clearly very successful, were there any particular challenges that you could highlight or mention and say maybe how you dealt with them?
I would say it's trying to find the right balance between work and family. And I think in all of my roles, I had a lot of travel, and that was always a significant challenge. And I was very fortunate that in the case of Laura, my first wife, she was willing to stay home and raise the kids, and she took on a disproportionate amount of raising the family. And so I think that having that kind of partnership is extremely important to making sure that you're successful work-wise. I'd say that work-life balance, that home balance, is extremely important.
Yeah, and it is a challenge, I think, for many who work in the industry. All kinds of roles. I've certainly faced the same thing, trying to bring up 3 kids and sometimes not spending a lot of hours at home or having to travel when there was something important coming up. And so it was a bit of a juggle of setting expectations, describing what I'm doing, but also being there for them when I'm home. I'm certainly there for them. I'm not trying to juggle 2 things.
Yeah.
And nowadays, perhaps the more difficult as people are working from home. And in one sense, they might have more time with their kids, but then they are trying to do too many things sometimes at the same time. So that's wonderful. I think we're going to wrap up fairly soon. So you're now with a relatively new public company. Could you tell us a bit about how you're finding that and some of the things that are going on with your company? Just update us.
Well, we just launched the company last month with an IPO on the NYSE. We raised about 90 million US, which was about 3 times what we expected to raise. But it's an exciting opportunity because we're spinning out a royalty vehicle from an existing mining development company. So not unlike the model that, say, Wheaton Precious Metals pursued about 15 years ago when they were spun out of Goldcorp with royalties on a number of Goldcorp's assets. We're doing the same thing with our parent company, Gold Mining, which still owns about 48% of the public company. And so our opportunity is to leverage the 18 royalties that we've inherited into a much bigger vehicle by diversifying into new royalty opportunities. I also think there's a scope for quite a bit of consolidation in that sub $1 billion category of royalty companies. There's been a proliferation of them over the last couple of years. Right. And generally, when there's that many entrants into a space, there's always a round of consolidation, rationalization. I think that's inevitable. And we've tried to position ourselves by recruiting some very high-profile people within our board management that have a lot of expertise. Collectively, that group has about 250 years of operating mining experience. Ian Telfer's on my advisory board. Warren Gilman is on our board. Alan Hare, who's my successor at Hudbay, who you know very well, Jackie, is on my board as well. So we have a bit of an operational bent to it. Alistair Still's come on as our Director of Technical Services, and John Griffith, who's my Chief Development Officer, ran a mining franchise for 30 years with Merrill Lynch and a number of other bulge bracket US banks. So it's quite a network that we can draw upon for the business. So it's very exciting. But the reason I'm in the royalty business now is I think inevitably the operating companies are going to have to start to deploy capital into mine development again. They haven't done that in any meaningful way for the last 6 or 7 years. And what we've seen is a big deterioration in reserves as a result of that. So it's become an imperative for them to start to reinvest back into development. So where you want to be at that end of the ecosystem is in the financing side of it. I think royalty companies have become an important source of capital to build new mines. And we're going to be going through a round of mine expansions, mine construction, to replace the depleting reserve and production profiles, not only in gold space, but in the base metal space as well. So I really deliberately positioned myself at that end of the value creation spectrum, earlier stage, both in terms of running gold royalty, but I've also launched a precious metal investment fund called Marshall, which is investing in early stage exploration, which has been starved of capital for many years as well. But now we'll have to invest significantly in exploration to replace depleted reserves.
Yeah, so very exciting, lots of opportunity there. Wonderful. So tell us, just before we wrap up here, are there any final tips you would have for those, as I said, relatively young or relatively new to the industry that you want to get as a last takeaway?
Well, I have to say that I look at the generation now, and they're way more sophisticated in their networking than I ever was. And so I'd say keep it up, and don't be shy about calling people in the CEO positions of major companies. Time and again, I've had these really smart young people reach out to me and ask for a meeting. And I said, well, yeah, why not? Yeah, I like meeting new people. You'd be surprised. You're more likely than not going to get a positive response. And even if you don't, what do you got to lose? And I just find that when these people come in to see me, they're so much better prepared than I ever was at their age and ask such insightful questions. So I say, don't be shy. You clearly have the goods. You do this way better than I do through organizations like this. I never had this available to me, or at least I wasn't aware of it And I really, I would say I was rather inept in my networking efforts back, in my early 20s. And I'd say, students these days and young professionals are far better at it than I ever was.
Yes, well, we hope that we can help them with those opportunities. I agree with you that when I was a student, I would have loved to have these contacts and these organizations helping us to meet people, giving us tips. There wasn't anything like that, and we had to make the cold calls. I was told 100, you've got to actually reach out to at least 100 if you hope to get that summer job.
Yeah.
100 CEOs, CFOs, COOs, anyone who could help to make a decision. So yeah, it was tough, and we'll do what we can to help. So I appreciate your joining us here and sharing your story, and hopefully others will learn from it and be encouraged as well, because it's a great business. It's very exciting, never a dull moment, and it's very rewarding. So once again, thanks for being here, Dave.
All right, thanks for having me on, Jackie.
Pleasure.